Hello students and welcome to Lesson 6, Day 1. We're going to play some other songs in the G position throughout this lesson, but first we have to learn about some new rhythms. We're going to learn about what a key signature is, and we're going to learn a new chord. So here is your theory lesson for the week. Let's get started. Here we have what I call, or what is called, the dotted quarter note. Now remember a while back you had the dotted half note. And a dotted half note got 3 counts because a half note normally got 2 counts. But then you divide that 2 counts into 1 count, and 2 plus 1 was 3. This works on the same principle. Notice this looks like a quarter note. The quarter note gets 1 count. Well, what's half of 1 is 1 half. So 1 plus a half would be 1 and a half counts. Okay? This is a little bit harder to count than other notes because basically you're going to have some things coming in between beats. Let's look over here, and you're going to see this exact rhythm when you play the song Deck the Halls. Notice this count gets 1 and a half. This eighth note gets half, so 1 and a half plus a half is equal to 2, and then this gets a count and that gets a count. So all this adds up to 4. Okay? So when I'm playing this, there's 2 different ways of counting it. I'm going to show you here an example in the treble clef, and then over here I'm going to show you an example in the bass clef. The first way, I'm going to subdivide. I'm going to count 1 and 2 and 3, 4. Now why would I do this? The best way is to think about this in terms of maybe cooking. If you have a recipe that calls for 1.5 cups of water, there's 3 ways you can fulfill the requirements of that recipe. You could have a full cup of water and then add a half cup of water, right? Or you could just take 3 half cups and pour them in, and then that would fulfill it. Here's the best way of thinking about this. When I subdivide, I'm going to think about each little half of the count. It's going to be like filling up that recipe with 3 half cups of water. So I'm going to think 1 and 2. Think 1 and 2. That's a half plus a half plus a half. And then this eighth note over here, remember we count eighth notes by saying the word and. I just have the letter A instead of and. So I would count 1 and 2 and 3, 4. These are just quarter notes, so that just gets 1 full count. Okay, that's what I call the subdividing way of counting this rhythm. Now you're going to be able to play this rhythm okay because you've heard the song Deck the Halls a million times. Now let's look over here at this way of counting. Okay, here this is not subdividing. What I'm going to do is I'm going to count the beats 1, 2, and then I'm going to acknowledge that this eighth note comes in between beat 3 and beat 2. So this would be, the example. You can go back to the analogy of the cooking thing. This would be like, not using a bunch of half cups, but using regular cups of water, regular whole cups of water. So think 1, 2, and 3, 4. Notice I don't tap every single eighth beat. I don't subdivide the beat into eighth notes. I just acknowledge that this note right here comes in between beat 2 and in between beat 3. But in either way you count, what you've got to look at is this. This note right here is 1.5 counts. The following note is a half count. 1.5 is 3 times as big as a half. Okay? So make sure that this note right here is 3 times as long as the following note. Okay? Now let's looking down here. Few other concepts. You've probably heard of music being in a key or in a key signature. I don't want to get into that too much right now, but what I want to point out right here, in your next 2 songs, you're going to have 1 sharp at the very beginning. You see this 1 sharp right here. You see that 1 sharp right there. That means that all Fs are now transformed into F sharps. So whenever you see an F in the treble clef or the bass clef, it is now an F sharp. That's what this thing does. Putting this 1 sharp at the beginning of the line transforms every single F into an F sharp. And that's considered putting music in a different key. I'm going to explain that a little bit more later on. I don't want to get bogged down into too many details right now. Okay, but just remember in the next few songs, you're going to always play F sharps no matter what. Some people ask, does it have to be the F that's right on this line here, for example? No, it does not. It does not have to be that one. It could be any F in the bass clef. You may not know that the note right up here on this line is an F, but this sharp right here in the treble clef applies to every single F in the treble clef is now transformed into an F sharp. Final thing we want to look at. In our last lesson, we learned our G chord and we learned our D chord, which was F sharp, A, and D. Now we're going to look at this chord right here, which is your C chord, your G, your C, and your E. I'm going to show you how to play that in the next lesson. This is going to be the first lesson where you get to play 3 chords throughout the lesson. You're going to play your G chord, your D chord, and your C chord. And remember in our previous lessons where we had 2 different versions of the G chord, you could play the G chord BDG or GBD, applies to the C chord here. Here we're playing G on the bottom, C in the middle, and E on top. Okay? All right. This is our theory for the week. Key signatures, the new chord, and the dotted quarter note. In the next lesson, we're going to learn this G, C, E chord and a different way to play chords.